Morning. It's Sunday, the 18th of April, and it's good to just bring some thoughts to your screen again, perhaps to your life. I hope they help, and I hope that whatever the last week or two have been, I've been on holiday. Well, I've been on leave. I haven't really been on holiday, but yeah, I've been away a tiny bit. That these have been good weeks since Easter. There's been a lot happening in the last week or two. There've been royal funerals, there've been tragic deaths of famous actors, all kinds of things have been on our screens and in our hearts and flooding into our lives from lots of directions. But one of the bits of news that you may have missed or got tucked away behind things that were deemed to be more important with a capital I, as A.A. Milne would have written them in Winnie the Pooh, is about the fact that it's 2 years now, just on 2 years, since the cathedral in Notre Dame burnt almost to the ground and was just saved structurally in time. I've been outside the cathedral watching buskers and street artists on the bridge over the river, but didn't go in myself. But it's a beautiful spot. It's a beautiful spot. Amongst the contenders, amongst the design proposals that were put in to replace the cathedral, or to rebuild the cathedral, was a proposal put in by an architectural firm called Studio NAB, and they designed a greenhouse roof for the cathedral. And I'll read a little bit about from an Architecture Digest about what their proposal was. In the aftermath of the blaze that destroyed the roof of Paris's iconic Notre Dame Cathedral, Studio NAB has envisioned a replacement greenhouse roof. Described as a cathedral in green for all, the project would see the creation of a rooftop greenhouse that embraces the reintroduction of biodiversity, education, and solidarity. The scheme is designed to be anchored in its time, turned towards the future, and representing the stakes of our time. The greenhouse would enable the professional reintegration of the poor and the disenfranchised through education about urban agriculture, horticulture, and permaculture, while reconnecting children with nature through educational workshops. Bees would be reintroduced to the cathedral through a central hive where beekeeping training would continue the scheme's ethos of productivity. Some of the burnt oak framework from the fire would be reused in the creation of planters and facilities present in the greenhouse, a symbol of acceptance of the course of history, while creating a metaphor between old and new. The scheme is one of many produced in response to the Notre Dame fire, with a competition for the roof's redesign commissioned last week. There are images if you want to go and see sort of architecture drawings and the kinds of images we used to that tell us what a project will look like when it's finished. I thought it was an inspirational and exciting option. So the really sad news, amongst all the sad news for me this week, was to hear that 1,000 ancient oak trees are being felled across the forests of France to rebuild the roof just as it was. At least one of those trees germinated around the time of the French Revolution. That tree has, without giving it, too much human qualities, has watched and seen France evolve as a nation from the beginnings of its status as a republic to the burning down of this great cathedral. So after all the invitation, after the announcement of a competition, after the potential to reimagine what this holy space might become, what it might say, what it might convey, what it might link to in the past and the future, and the way those things are in tension always and are informing each other, the decision-making body, whoever it is, has just decided let's do exactly what was there before. I think that's a missed opportunity, but I really grieve the 1,000 oak trees that are being cut down right now to be seasoned and then to be introduced to rebuilding what was, with no link, it would seem, to what is or what will be. Why talk about that? Well, we are in this Easter season between Easter and Pentecost. We're in this very in-between time in the life of Jesus and his disciples, especially his disciples, who who are, and today's reading is one of the resurrection appearances in Luke's Gospel, where again they think it's a ghost, and then he eats some fish, and then they begin to see that and think that it really is him, but still don't have any true sense of what that means, or what the implications of that are, or what tomorrow looks like. Never mind next week, next month, next year. They are in what psychologists and others would call, philosophers, liminal space. Really just in between space, an in between space between what was and what is coming. And I guess we could sort of say we're always in between what was and what's coming. But actually, when our lives are stable and solid, and we think that and trustworthy and dependable in the patterns and the activities of them, we're not really in a liminal space. We're much more in a consolidated space. That often looks backwards far more happily than it looks forwards. That is able to look back and see what has been more easily than it is able to imagine what might yet come. And of course that's to be understood. But we fool ourselves sometimes. We convince ourselves that we are in this great in-between space with God in the Christian church, when in fact we've settled very, very solidly and often comfortably into something quite concrete. And so as I've reflected on Easter and the time beyond Easter while I've been on leave these last couple of weeks, in the light of this last year, I think this has been for us an incredibly, well, it has been unnerving, it has been disabling, it has been disappointing, it has been tragic, it has been all kinds of things. It's been full of opportunity, it's been full of adventure, full of new skills, new experiences, even though they may have been more geographically limited. But it's been probably for most of us the longest period of time we've ever been in an in-between space. Thrust upon us. We don't choose these spaces well ourselves. Thrust upon us by coronavirus. And as we look to the future, as we think about this last week, I mean, on Friday, Rebecca and I, my wife and I, she took a day off work, we dropped Lucas at school and went off to Knaresborough for the day. Now, if you know Yorkshire, Knaresborough is about a 45-minute drive. And we parked the car, we wandered through the village, we went to all the charity shops and wandered down to the river, had a little walk along the river, queued for the Marigold Cafe, sat down, watched the rowing boats going under the railway bridge as the trains went overhead, and had some lunch. It felt very familiar, but at the same time it felt quite different. Yesterday morning we decided we would go to the York Car Boot Sale, which happens at the racecourse. Again, just a fascinating insight, if you ever go to it, into the things that people have considered precious in their lives before, and the things that come out of house clearances, and the kinds of weird and wonderful knickknacks that people want to sell and want to pass on. And we wore our masks some of the time, and we got a coffee, and people were mostly good about social distancing. It felt like a safe place to be, but it was something we had done once in the last 2 years, really, almost year and a half, because last year there were just, I think, 2 or 3, and we went to one of them. And reflecting on it, it was almost a bit emotional, getting out the car and stepping into something something and knowing that you've missed it. Of course, church is another example of that. And as we think in quite detailed ways about reopening our church in Haxby and Wigginton and at Central Methodist, and as our brothers and sisters in other faith traditions and other Christian denominations around us do the same, we are unavoidably tempted to do what the judging panel for the competition that was redesigning the roof or taking submissions for the redesigned roof of the Notre Dame Cathedral have done. and that is to only be able really to plant ourselves in expressing again where we've already been. This is a familiar theme in the videos that I've done, and it will be a familiar theme in my preaching. It has been before coronavirus and will continue to be. And if that's a bit tiresome, I apologize, sort of. But the story of the gospel, the story of today's gospel in Luke is of Jesus all the way through his ministry and beyond for the disciples. The unavoidable fact of them being continually in an in-between space. Things are not as they were. They don't know what the future looks like. They're working it out and finding it out as they go, and they find themselves disturbed. They find themselves fearful. They find themselves frustrated. They find themselves tired. They find themselves full of questions. They find themselves like all of us, wanting a more solid place to stand. And the temptation that we see in moments in the Gospels, especially with Peter and in other times, we see the disciples wanting to solidify and make concrete and very solid this moment that they're in with Jesus. And his words are almost always, but wait, there's more. We're moving on from this place. We're going down the mountain after the transfiguration. In the story we've read, you need to carry on waiting because God has something more to offer you in terms of the revelation of God inside of yourselves in Pentecost, and the confidence and the courage and the clarity, even if it's not certainty and a lack of fear, that will come because of your discovery richly of God living in you. We should not be surprised that we're spending time in between places, and that we should be very careful as a Christian church to not want to get out of that too quickly. Now, I say that carefully because for some of you, for me at times, this pandemic has been an awful experience. For myself or for other people whose lives I've shared. So I don't say, oh, isn't it wonderful to be here? But I do want to say it is good to be here with the disciples, confused about where God is in the midst of all of this and what we can trust and what's solid and substantial and where Jesus is in this and what the past looks like and what we do with it and what the future might be that we haven't yet imagined or and this wisdom that comes that says wait, but be ready. So I leave that with you this morning. Not a new thought, not a new theme, but I have to say I shed a tear. I shed a tear watching a tree fall to the ground in a French forest that has been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, because some group of people, in my humble opinion, were only able to look backwards and solidify what had already been. Then they were able to even make room for it would seem a little bit of imagination in the unknown of what lies ahead, and a real statement about where we are now, as a nation, as a world, as a people, as a planet. No, I'm not having a go at Roman Catholics. No, I'm not having a go at the French. Not at all. I just grieved this week, deeply grieved, the loss of 1,000 trees for lack of imagination. We are in an in-between time. That will continue. We need to nurture the in-betweenness of it, because that is of God. We need to support each other in doing that, because it is hard to do, and because it is costly to do that, and because we would far rather, in many moments, because we're just tired, we'd far rather retreat back into the very things that are most familiar to us. And we will do that. It's important not to say everything we did before was somehow to be jettisoned. Of course not. But let's not be people who can only see what has been. because that is not what Jesus asks of his disciples, ever. And that is certainly not what he tries to ask them to do and to be in the reading for today, as they live with their confusion, as they discover that it really is him, as they wonder what they're waiting for and what God is still going to do, and as day by day the unknown unfolds. So bless you on this particular Sunday, the 18th of April, whatever it's like for you, or whenever in the week, whenever in the week that follows or time after you're watching this. Let's be gospel people. Let's learn how to do that by having a go and making mistakes. Let's give each other room to discover an ability to be uncomfortable together and to wait and to not know. And let's cherish where we've come from, but let's not idolize it, because I do think that's what's happening in Paris right now. And I think we're all the poorer for it, both as a place to visit and be inspired by, and also as a great signpost of what we might do with the best of what we've been and all that might lie ahead. So bless you. Have a good day and a good week.